speak in English. I hope you will have a good translation in Spanish. I will bring you the Triodos group perspective this morning, where Mikel will go more into Spain, as he's responsible for Spain with his team. And it's important to realize that Triodos Bank, as a European bank, has a special role in the different countries, has a special mission in the different countries, and we are strongly connected by the values, but also there is room for diversity, for different approaches in different countries. And I will tell you a little bit about the other countries as well, as inspiration, as you can see where the bank is at the moment. 2014 has been another, I would say, successful year for the bank, for Triodos Bank, but it has been a year with challenges and opportunities. And that's also, to go a little bit to the letter, why we call our annual report, Welcome to Optimism. What is today not something what you hear a lot. Quite a few people are pessimistic about the future. I think we can be optimistic as well. There are a lot of opportunities, particularly also for Triodos, and we have to highlight them because the opportunities will create a future, not pessimism. So welcome to optimism. Welcome to this meeting. To give you a little bit of a context where we are operating in as Triodos Bank, where we're thinking about our future, about what we can do more, what we can do better, I would like to go a little bit more into the world of today. What are we facing there? Also the financial system, because we are part of that. It's very interesting that many people want to move their account to Triodos Bank from other banks. At the same time, we're also part of that system. We have to change the system as a whole as well. And we can do that, of course, much better when people come to us and we work with them so we can show that there's another way of banking possible. But still, we are in this broader context, we are involved in that. And we have to play our role there, a positive role, a changing role. But if you look at the bigger picture, you see that increasingly there is fear in society. And fear has been used as an instrument more and more to paralyze people. That's the way I see it at the moment. It's done by politicians, and I think it's happening in all countries in the world. Politicians use fear as an instrument to almost disable people instead of enable them. One of the effects in the financial sector that there is a lot of regulation has come to the financial sector. When the financial crisis was there in 2008, 2009, there was the sort of, well, calm weather, I would say, before the tsunami of regulation in the years after that. But then, in the last years, we also have been confronted with a lot of new regulation. Now, regulation as such is not a bad thing. Banks have a role in society to play. They can really sort of hurt society, the economy, so it's good that there is proper regulation. But you see at the same time that it's not solving the problems. Regulations are not solving the problems. And there is a sort of notion that a different culture, a different approach in banking is needed, but the focus is very strong on the regulation. And I think Triodos, as being part of the financial system, is also having this tsunami of regulation to deal with. And we do. We do it with a positive mood. We want to make the best out of it. But still, it is something what is a reaction on what happened in the financial crisis, where suddenly was visible what banks could do to the financial system and to society at large. And there is a danger of that banks going back to business as usual. Many of my colleagues, and I speak them quite a lot, and I think it's not different here in Spain from any other countries, they feel there was a hiccup in 2009. We dealt with it with a lot of support from the taxpayer. We dealt with it, but as soon as possible we want to go back in business as usual. I think that's the wrong approach. We really should learn from it much more intensively and see what can be different. And many look at Triodos as a reference, as a bank who has done it in a different way and could give some signals where to go with mainstream banking. But there's a long way to go. At the same time, you see a lot of initiatives coming bottom up who want cultural change, social change, and also even looking for different currency systems. But all of you know crowdfunding as a good example of people taking up things themselves, want to change it themselves. That bottom-up movement as a sort of having an opposite movement to the top-down movement of regulation is a very interesting one. And we are almost in the middle there. So we have to deal with the top-down regulation, but we also want to be part of this bottom-up movement with all the projects we finance, the businesses we finance. And what we also see is that government is not anymore the one who provides the solutions. I think 10, 20 years ago, we looked at government immediately if there were issues. Today we see, well, government will at best create a healthy context for initiatives, but the initiatives should come from the people who take initiatives, who do their business. And you see them starting businesses, social businesses, the whole notion of social entrepreneurship, also in this country, but it's a worldwide movement, is an important new development. It is something where you like the entrepreneurial approach, because entrepreneurial has to do with initiative-taking people, but at the same time, it's in a social context. It's done really for other people and not just earn a living. And I think that combination is something of the future. You also see that people talk more and more about the circular economy. So we cannot only use things from the earth and produce waste. We have to sort of make the circle round, use the waste again to use. And there is all sort of financing questions there where Triodos Bank could play an important role. That is the reason for optimism. There is a changing economy, and in that changing economy, we can play an important role. And even big business is starting to respond to that. It's companies like Unilever, the bigger fashion companies, who really look at those things as that is where the future comes. We cannot rely year after year by more cotton produced in very bad circumstances. We maybe have to use used clothes to produce new clothes. And I think that are interesting initiatives where 10, 20 years ago that was seen as very alternative, very much a niche. Today that has become more of a real solution for problems we face in the environmental sphere. How to do that as a relatively small bank, we are still a relatively small bank, absolutely in a bigger Europe, is partnerships. We created partnerships in the past years, and the most recent partnership we joined is what you called B Corporation. Maybe you haven't heard about B Corporation, what it is. B stands for Beneficiary Corporation. It's an American initiative where now already more than 1,200 businesses are a member of. They go through a real good process where they are tested on their beneficiary elements. How do they benefit society, the stakeholders? It's a new movement of businesses who say, well, interesting enough, coming from the Anglo-Saxon world, from the US, and Triodos Bank has become the first bank in Europe to have this certification of a B Corporation. I think we are now with 2 in Spain, so there's still some room for growth there. But it's an interesting movement where people say, we want to have a different type of business. Business what is benefiting the stakeholder and not only the shareholder. And we came out very positive, and we think we can work with these companies who also may be our clients, for example, to work on the next wave of innovation in companies. We already created some years ago the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, what is a group of banks worldwide who are dealing with the issues of poverty, of environmental challenges. And also this movement is growing, and more banks become member of it and are interested in learn from the experience of, for example, Triodos Bank, but we also learn from these other banks. So partnerships are key for the future. It's not to create one big bank and that's it. Probably the future looks much more as a network of like-minded organizations who we finance, who we can team up with, who we can take up bigger and bigger projects on a network based. Then a little bit more focusing in Triodos Bank itself in 2014, and to give you a few numbers and give you some explanation on that. It has been a good year. We had sort of a limited growth, less growth as the years before, but we had to focus very strongly on improving our internal governance, our internal risk systems. And that's a very normal thing for a fast-growing organization where a lot of things are based on mutual trust, and it's actually good it's based on mutual trust, but at a certain moment as a mid-sized bank you have to start to document things more thoroughly. That's the spirit of the time. You have to do that, and we did last year and very successfully. That was at the expense of some growth. We have to be honest about that. So instead of a 20% growth, we had a 10% growth. And here you see that the total assets under management grew to 10.6 billion. Now, 10% growth is for Triodos a modest growth. If I tell my colleagues, they say, what? This is still a very good growth number. And I think for the next year, we expect that we can continue that. So we continue to have more impact to grow more. The sustainable loans, so that's really only on the bank side. In the 10.6, there are also the investment funds. That grown was actually 12%. Net profit was quite good, got up with 70%. We really sort of were able to reduce costs, keep our margins okay, and could really realize a nice net profit, particularly interesting also for you as DR holders, although I know you're not just coming for the financials, also for the other values. Customer growth is there as well, 13% more customers, and we expect this year that that will grow even faster. I come back to that later. And co-workers, 12% more, so very much in line with the growth. So to give you a little bit of a picture where we are as a bank, with our 10.6 billion, that's funds and the bank together, we are really becoming a mid-sized financial organization. In this picture you see the growth in the last years. The green part is the balance sheet of the bank. That is what we mainly do here in Spain, for example, but also in the other countries. The yellow part is the investment funds, who are mainly in the Netherlands and Belgium, to some extent now also in Germany and the UK. They have grown as well because there is a tendency that people like, instead of just savings, also invest in investment funds. So good growth on all levels, and making it possible for the bank to fulfill its mission. Here there's another picture. This is the picture of where you see on a group level that the growth of the funds entrusted is still continuing, although interest rates are low, and we are quite transparent about it. The interest rates in Triodos Bank are on market level or just below, but still people like the other values we create, the more social values, and you can see that there is a real growth in the fund entrusted. The loans to the fund entrusted, what do we do with the savings? That is really where the challenge has been and will be in the next years. There is a lot of money in the market. People start to save more. There's also a lot of money coming from our friends in Frankfurt, from the European Central Bank, 60 billion a month at the moment, as you could probably have been reading in the papers. That altogether is flooding into the economy, and a lot of that is reflected in the balance sheet of banks, also in the one of Triodos Bank. Although our money only comes from the depositors, does not come from Frankfurt, the whole system as such creates a lot of extra liquidity. So here you see that only, and we say honestly, only 63% of the deposits is now going into loans. That should be much higher. That should be going 70, 75%, maybe 80%. That is our longer term target. So stable growth and creating value for you as depository receipt holders. If you look at the net profit, you can see that the last years our profit was been increasing. This is in the left X is more the amount, as you can see, and the right one is the return on equity. So we have quite a stable return on equity, but the profit as such has grown. Now profit levels are always relatively. If you look them over a much bigger time, you can see that we're actually doing quite well if you compare to other banks. With the mainstream banks, this is much more volatile. Maybe today you hear also from banks like Santander and others that profit rates go up quite quickly again, but there also have been times where the profits were quite low and were even losses I don't think with Santander, but with other banks there were. And I think it's important to always compare the stability of the profits of Triodos Bank with the volatility, higher profits and lower profits of other banks. We feel this is the level at the moment with all the growth we realize and also has to be financed. We're quite happy with this level of profit, but we can see that in the next years that can even grow a little bit more, but this is where we are at the moment. What we also have done, because we are very interested in your view as depository receipts holders, the providers of capital, what make the bank work, we also want from you to hear how we are doing. Do you think we're doing good, not so good, what needs more attention? We have done, like we do every year, a survey, and many of you have responded. And that survey shows in this graph that you have been satisfactory, very satisfactory. So it's a very good outcome. We're very happy with that support, because it's very important that the providers of our capital, you, are happy with the way the bank is growing, what it's doing with your money. And you have to realize, particularly share capital, depository receipt capital, as we call it in Triodos, is really giving the leverage for the bank to operate as a bank as it can. Without capital, we cannot be a bank. And today, capital is even more important than it was in the last years. So, good outcome for us and a real stimulus to move on in the direction we have taken. Then I would like to tell a few things about the countries, the other countries. I will keep that very short, but Spain I don't have to talk a lot about, Michael will do that, but in Belgium we had a strong growth, has been very good, and for the first time we also opened a commercial regional office, like we have many here in Spain, and it was where Spain really inspired our Belgian colleagues, and it's a very nice office in the city of Ghent, and we will see how it will work. It's the, as you have already experienced here in Spain, the expression of being close to the customers. We want to do that in Belgium as well, and probably also in Germany and in the UK. In the UK we do have an office in Scotland in the north, because Scottish people want to have their own office. They actually wanted their own country, but that wasn't successful for the time being, but at least they have a separate Triodos office. That's something. Germany has started 5 years ago, is now really coming out of the startup phase and starting to sort of grow satisfactory. But it's a tough competition in Germany with it's an overbanked country with a lot of banks who are also interested in the sphere where we are operating in. So a lot of entrepreneurship is needed, but we're going in the right direction, and we think longer term Germany is a quite important country to be in. There's a lot of innovation there in sustainability, in new social forms. We like to be there. The Netherlands has a very nice growth in savings. And just to update you on one of the last developments, we got in 1 month, we got extra 15,000 customers, because people are so fed up with what's happening with some of the other Dutch banks that they really moved their accounts and probably also their money to Triodos Bank. Now 15,000, if you see in these numbers in 1 month, is a lot. But it's giving a signal that there is a lot of people considering, and more even I would say than a few years ago, can Triodos really be my first bank? Can we be the alternative for my mainstream bank now? And it's around for many years now, it's solid, it's safe, transactions go very well, they do the right things with my money. So probably we have to be prepared for quite a big expansion on that level. Not so much because of our own marketing, although we are very proud of our marketing, but because simply there is also the desire in society to deal in a much more conscious way with money and do that through banking. So we are very happy with that development. In the UK, we developed quite well. It's very hard to be noticed in the UK. There are a lot of initiatives, so our bank really has to scream very loud to be present as a bank there, but they do very well. They're now introducing a current account, different from Spain, they didn't have that, and we want to become the full bank there and make also a real jump in their growth. France, I mentioned that I think the last years is something we have been working on. It's not an official branch, but they're almost ready to become one. So we still have to make the decision, but France is a very interesting country, and they're making more and more loans. They're doing that out of our Belgium office, but they actually have a small building in Paris, working with 10 people there, doing interesting loans. And France is ready for Triodos, I would say. Triodos now has to be ready for France. That's another question, but we're working on that. And then there is investment management. Investment management is operating from the head office and is focusing on the management of 22 investment funds. Social responsible investment funds investing in the market. It's over 1 billion there, but also very specific impact funds like the organic growth funds, like microfinance, like real estate, sustainable real estate. So very nice sort of collection of investment funds, doing very well and different from what people sometimes feel, having the same sort of returns as other funds, but are much more stable longer term. So an important development. And then last but not least, private banking, also something what has been established in mainly the Netherlands and Belgium. Private banking is for the customers who are more wealthy, have more money to worry about, I always say, and we can help them to give that a good direction. There are more and more people, particularly, I would say in the northern part of Europe, where a lot of money is inherited now from the previous generation, and the younger generation want to give a very conscious and positive steer to that. So we try to provide advice, particularly advice on what sort of possibilities there are. Direct investment through our funds, through the SRI funds. So that's now over 1 billion, quite a substantial growth there as well. What about the immediate future? I said already, we see a lot of opportunities. We are optimistic about that. Although regulation held us a little bit back, we had to cope with that, we did. Now we can move on. We want to grow the loan portfolio more than we did last year. We think there's a lot of need there out there, and we want to be more the bank for the sectors, even more than we were. We want to be close, we want to be really the expert in the sectors. What will require an extra effort? So we think we will have a controlled growth in the next year between 10 and 20%. We are very careful in the annual report by saying 5 to 15%, but actually our ambition is to be higher there, because that is where you provide us capital for, that is why depositors give us money for, to really make them at work in the economy. As you've seen earlier, the reinvestment rate is simply too low. We have to bring that up, so we will do that. We also will diversify our loan portfolios, finding new sectors, but also within the sectors trying to find new customers. And that's an interesting challenge, because before you go into a new sector, you really have to know what you can not only finance there, you have to know the sector, but also what you want to change in that sector in a positive way. So there's an extra effort for Triodos to do that. The longer term, what is the longer term perspective? I think the longer term perspective is that we want to keep an open mind on where we go with finance in general in society. For a long time we thought finance will be provided by banks and that's it. We feel there are other opportunities, for example through crowdfunding, but also the way we finance as banks. And with the sectors we are in, particularly sectors who are looking at circular economy solutions, the more sustainable solutions, but also in healthcare, in other sectors, we want to be closer to them and see how we can create finance solutions where maybe even beyond banking. So for the next 10 years, we want to keep an open mind for that, want to be a front runner in that. At the same time, we want to grow the bank as we have it, because we have built that bank in the last 35 years. It's a healthy bank with good ratios, good solvency, good capital base, good liquidity. So we want to use that and put that at work. At the same time, innovation is needed as well. So we see for the Triodos type of banking a great future. And we think we can play an important role in society to be a reference for what can be new and how we can do it. And I would like to thank you for making that all possible, because you as shareholders really provide us the means to do that. So thank you for that. And now I give the floor to Mika. Thank you very much.